This is a supplemental video on cancer and how it relates to mitosis and cell division. So I know the topic is heavy, and we'll talk about statistics a little bit when we're all together in class because I do have an activity for you in our reading there. But I can pretty much guarantee you that um, if you personally don't experience cancer at some point in your life, and about a third of Americans do, then chances are you know someone or who knows someone who knows someone who has. You're probably not far removed from cancer as a whole. The type might be different, but it does affect pretty much everyone if you live long enough. And basically what it is it's a variety of diseases. There are multiple types, but it's uncontrolled cell growth. That's the commonality between all types of cancer, whether it's skin cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, it doesn't matter. All types of cancer are defined by this uncontrolled, rampant cell growth. The types that are the most devastating are the ones that move around the body. We'll talk about vocab here in a second. That's called metastasis, but that's when cancer can move through the bloodstream or the lymph vessels and affect another part of the body. So tumors, some vocab, tumors are any kind of abnormal swelling or lump. They do not necessarily mean you have cancer in the malignant kind of form, the kind that can kill you. So just because you have a tumor doesn't mean it's cancerous, but cancers do tend to form these lumps called tumors. So just any kind of abnormal swelling or lump is a tumor. Cysts are not cancerous. So cysts are a kind of different things. They're an enclosed sac within the interstitial tissue in your body that accumulates fluid or debris. So those, I just want to make it clear that these are not the same thing, right? So these are not not cancerous. All right. If you do have cancer, there are some I don't want to call them varieties, but types, I guess. So let's start with benign. Benign means it means okay or good. I don't want to call it a good tumor because you don't really want to have any kind. But these are not going to be tumors that move. They're not going to metastasize. They're not going to spread around the body. They stay where they are and they don't invade other cells. This is a tumor that can easily be cut out and you can be done with it. If it's a malignant tumor, it can move, right? This is essentially the same thing as saying that you have cancer, is saying that you have a malignant tumor that can move around the body, right? This is the kind that can spread. This is the kind that can metastasize. This is the kind that you would be concerned over, and you would need to get treated as quickly as possible. Oh, sorry. This is melanoma. A melanocyte is a pigment cell that gives you your skin color. So melanoma is a skin cancer of the cells that give you your skin pigmentation. And then malignant, again, just means that it can spread. So this would have to be taken care of ASAP. So basically just some symptoms. And again, these are not formal notes. You're not really going to have a lot of quiz or test questions on this. This is an informal PowerPoint, just kind of giving you information about something that you should know about. Local symptoms are any symptoms in the immediate area where the cancer is. This, depending on what it is, it could be just something like a lump or some swelling. Bleeding or pain are also associated with it. But the point is that they're local. They're not in other parts of the body. Right. If you do have cancer and this has metastasized, it's spread to other parts of the body. It's not uncommon to see large lymph nodes. These are the things underneath your neck that the doctor will feel for if you have like an upper respiratory infection. Sometimes they get swollen. They're basically in charge of white blood cell production and storage. So if they swell, it's usually because you're sick. You have them in your groin. You have them underneath your arms. So those are other things that can get infected. Bone pain, coughs, fractures, anything neurological. Again, this depends on where the cancer has metastasized to. But again, this is going to be somewhere else besides the original section of the body the cancer was in, because metastasis means it's moved elsewhere. Systemic symptoms are things like weight loss, poor appetite, fatigue, sweating, anemia. These are full body system effects that are usually almost exclusively associated with a metastasized tumor. So some quick mechanisms, basically in the cell cycle, and you don't have to memorize this at all, but in the cell cycle there are some checkpoints. We'll talk more about these checkpoints in AP Bio if you ever take AP Bio as a junior or senior. Cells check to make sure things aren't broken, right? They make sure that DNA isn't damaged, that it's been replicated correctly, and so on in multiple areas of the cell cycle, right? If any of these things has gone wrong, so maybe you have chromosomes that are misaligned in metaphase, right? A normal cell will either fix it or it will stop dividing. So think of this as like a red light or a stop sign, right? A responsible driver will stop at them. A responsible cell will stop dividing. Cancerous cells are like a car driver who blows through the red light. They ignore these cell checkpoints. They don't care that the chromosomes got misaligned. They don't care that the DNA got damaged. They're going to keep dividing anyway. And that is basically what causes uncontrolled cell growth. And the chances that the DNA is damaged or mutated is very high in that case. And because you are doing uncontrolled cell division, all of the daughter cells inherit that mutation. They inherit that changed DNA. And that makes all of the daughter cells equally unlikely to stop at cell checkpoints. And this is the origin of the vast majority of cancers. And there's a specific gene called P53 that is, it's not the only gene, but it's one of the primary genes responsible for things like breast cancer and a lot of other cancers. If it's broken, if it's a defective copy, then cells tend to not acknowledge these stop signs, and they just keep on dividing. Quick causes, a lot are chemical. A mutagen is anything that causes DNA to mutate. We'll read about these in class, so I'm not going to talk about them in detail right now. Radiation, including sunlight, electromagnetic radiation. Skin cancer is mostly because of not using sunscreen and being exposed to sunlight for too long over time. Viral bacterial infections can also impact this, hormonal imbalances, immune system. Heredity is a big one. You'll hear that cancers are they run in the family, perhaps. That's because certain genes have higher mutation rates, or you've inherited certain copies of regulatory genes that are related to cancer genes or genes that suppress the cell cycle and things like that. So that's how it can be hereditary. For screening, most cancer screenings are non-invasive in the sense that you're not having to draw blood or anything. Most of the time you'll be doing self-examinations. This is for men and women. Get in the habit of doing this. You should know what should be there and what shouldn't be there. But the sooner you get into the habit of self-examining, the better. The rest of this is, so actually preventative medicine, mammograms for women, usually in the 40s is when they start routine mammograms. Pap smears for cervical cancer, colonoscopies for colon rectal cancer, prostate exams for prostate cancer, right? And x-rays can show, I'll show you an x-ray here, I think in a second, yeah, of darkened areas where detect tumors and detect cancer. The rest is a little bit more invasive, so blood tests, they actually collect blood and they can actually measure your cell production count. Certain cells are associated with certain types of cancer. And a biopsy, again, you might be familiar with this, is basically when they take a sample, right? They take a little needle or a scraper and they remove some cells and they check them out under a microscope. And I'll show you in the reading in class what some of these cancerous cells look like under a microscope compared to normal cells. So here's an x-ray. There is breast cancer. So this is a breast, and this is normal tissue, but down here is an abnormal, dividing mass of cells. This may or may not be picked up in a self-examination, but a self-examination would be kind of the first line of defense against something like that. Surgery is where you can remove the tumor. This is the best case is when the tumor is benign, it hasn't metastasized. Unfortunately, if it has moved around the body, it's much, much harder to cut out. Even if you do manage to cut it out, there's the chance that it went somewhere else and was not cut out from that part of the body, right? It is not uncommon for people to have entire portions of their body removed. Angelina Jolie made news, I think maybe like a decade ago at this point, a couple of years ago, when she had a double mastectomy. She actually had her breasts removed because she realized that she had a high probability of developing breast cancer, right? Ovarian cancer is similarly, it's not as common, but it's equally as deadly potentially, uterine cancer. So, again, pre-screening of these, getting these things kind of routinely checked is the best defense against this. Some DNA services like 23andMe collect data on this, depending on especially breast cancer because of its prevalency in women. But I think there's some litigation, there's some court cases involved in how much the company is allowed to disclose. I don't know if the breast cancer genes, the BRCA genes, BRCA was one of the more common ones, are actually available from that service, but things like 23andMe, Ancestry.com collect information about this as well as your background. Right. Radiation is the mass poisoning of quickly dividing cells. So it's not just cancer cells that get hit with radiation. It's really any cell that grows quickly. This is why cancer patients will also often, if not lose their hair, they'll shave it off preemptively. The lining of your mouth, the lining of your digestive system, all of these cells grow and divide very quick. So those cells are usually affected as well as cancerous cells. Typically, normal cells grow back healthy. It's not exactly an easy, treatment to undergo. It's not something that people are excited about when you undergo radiation. It's not always going to cure you of cancer. It's actually particularly barbaric in terms of how cancer is treated. Hopefully, we move out of using radiation to treat cancer. It does make you very sick. Similarly to chemo, which is the next one I want to talk about, which is just basically putting your body in a chemical bath. Again, similarly to chemotherapy, radiation, chemotherapy is hard to target certain cells. You tend to affect many, many, many cells besides the cancerous cells. Again, this targets rapidly dividing cells. I'm sorry, I did misspeak for a second. Radiation usually does not target rapidly dividing cells. That was chemo. So my apology there. This is where skin, hair follicle cells, lining of the stomach, etc., the digestive system, those also tend to go because they do divide very quick. Again, chemotherapy is not something you look forward to. A lot of times it fails. It's not a pleasant experience at all. It really is the slow and consistent poisoning of your own body to get rid of a handful of cells that need to go away. And ideally, again, chemo, just like with radiation, will go away and we replace it with something called gene therapy. I'm not going to talk too much about that here. We'll talk about gene therapy later on when we talk about DNA and genetic engineering. But hopefully the future of cancer treatment is sequencing your genome and then doing what's called targeted gene therapy, where we can actually turn on or turn off genes that are affecting whatever cancer you have. So these are just some other treatments. Again, gene therapy is hopefully where we're headed with all of this within ideally both of our lifetimes. Angiogenesis is one that I want to talk briefly about. Cancer cells secrete chemical signals that draw the blood cells, the blood supply to it. So they essentially cut blood off from surrounding tissue and feed themselves from your blood supply. This is called angiogenesis. So one line of drugs that can stop that is called an angiogenesis inhibitor. It prevents tumors from redirecting the blood flow of your capillaries and prevents them, it starves them from blood, because if they don't have blood, they don't have, that's their nutrient supply, right? So that's kind of an interesting line of research if you want to go ahead and Google that on your own. Let's see, others, again, immunotherapy is a type, hormonal therapy is a type. We've talked about chemo and radiation. And then again, hopefully gene therapy is the way of the future here. And that's it. So we'll talk more about this in class. I do have a reading for you guys as well, so you will see more information about this, and I hope this helps, and I will see you next time.